This is the Sony a7 II, a mirrorless camera that was released almost 10 years ago in 2014. It has a full-frame sensor, image stabilization, and can be found for as cheap as $600 on eBay or $1,000 brand new. And I think it is one of, if not the best deal in all of photography right now. Let's start off with the positives about this camera, and thankfully there's a lot of them. As I mentioned before, this is a full frame sensor, but not only is it giving you the standard benefits you'd expect from a full frame sensor, like letting in more light or having better bokeh, it's also offering incredible low light performance, specifically in your RAW files. Take a look at this shot, just of some oranges on my counter, that's very underexposed, and watch how we can pull up the shadows in this image to make it look really nice. And while we're on the topic of low light, I feel like we should mention this camera's ISO. This camera has a max ISO of 25,600, which is very high. Should you always use this camera at that max ISO, or are the images really crisp? No. But take a look at this. This is as close to the same image as I could take, with the same situation, same lighting, same everything, just with the ISO gradually going up. And look how crisp and clean these images are. Another thing I really like about this camera is the grip and feel. I have pretty large hands, and this camera feels right at home. My only real complaint about the button layout or the grip at all is that the record button is off over here to the side, and it really feels like an afterthought. But thankfully, you do have a bunch of customizable buttons, and you can customize one of those to act as the record button if it's as frustrating for you as it is for me. While we're on the subject of recording, let's also talk about video on this camera. Oh, goodness gracious. Oh, and that's something else that I love about this camera. I love the video features of it. You are missing out on 4K, but what you are getting is the ability to shoot an S-Log, the ability to have Zebra, a full-size mic jack for it as well. And of course, you're still getting that excellent stabilization from this camera and sometimes from your lenses. Let's go back in. Now, there are still some things that I do not love about this camera. As I mentioned previously, this camera only does 1080p as its max resolution, which for the most part isn't an issue, but it is a bottleneck that you're going to start running into. Another thing that I'm not a huge fan of is sometimes this camera really seems to struggle with autofocus, especially in low light. And if you're used to more modern cameras with better autofocus systems, it might sometimes be a bit of a drag. But honestly, even bigger than both of those things, to me at least, is going to be the battery life of this camera with these tiny batteries. Especially for 2014, mirrorless cameras were not known for their good battery life, and it was one of the big drawbacks of them at the time. I would say on average, I get about an hour's worth of shooting with batteries from this camera. And that will sometimes make it so it feels like you just start shooting and you're out of battery, especially if you are doing video. Now there are battery grips from this camera, and I do have one of them as well, and that does help, giving you at least a bit more battery life, but it certainly still isn't great. Okay. So what do you get when you put all that together? Well, I think you're getting one of the best budget cameras in all of photography right now. I'm not even sure if there's a competitor that comes close in the capabilities of what this camera can do for you. The closest thing that I can think of is a Canon RP, but the Canon RP is $150 more than this camera from what I've seen used. It doesn't have image stabilization as well. If you or someone you know is wanting to upgrade their photography and go from using a phone or a Micro Four Thirds sensor or an APS-C sensor and really get that full frame experience, this is such an excellent camera to start with, I think. It has so many features that you are not going to be limited by what this camera can do for a long time, especially if you are new. I don't think I can recommend this camera enough. And if you're interested, you should take a look at it. Thank you so much for watching. God bless. Have a great day. See you in the next one.